Håkan is the expert with many years of experience. He stands behind major transformations in large and small organizations. He is the humble mind that turned many managers into true agile leaders. His wise and positive approach inspires and brings consensus to groups. I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with him as much as I did. And we are rolling. Hi, Håkan. How are you doing, man?
I'm fine. Hi, Dennis.
Nice to see you here on another episode of our podcast.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure for me to have you here.
Thanks.
And today we're going to talk about several topics. I think we will start with the one that we could call why Agile is not the same as Scrum, or not equals to Scrum.
Hmm?
And that kind of touches the Agile on the high level, Agile methodologies, and Scrum as being part of it. And I know you for like 2 years because that's how far I work in the same organization with you. And I know that you've been working with Agile for much longer than I am.
Yeah, I started off, you can say 2010-ish or something like that. So I've been working on a few other companies, and I also been a consultant. So I've been around and worked both with big transformations, but also with startups, which was interesting. So then everything you have learned changed, and of course, just because they were more, Agile for them was very structured. Example, yeah.
Nice. So, I mean, it's since 2010, it's like, damn, it's a lot of years. It's, I don't know how many years that is.
10 years.
And I mean, what keeps you running up until now? What makes you passionate about that?
Yeah, I think I understand myself as I love collaboration. That's really what I'm looking for in life, it seems like. So I go where there is interest in collaboration, and I've come to the conclusion that agile ways of working is very much about creative collaboration, and you're trying to organize things in a kind of messy situation. And then you add some structure, and I'm a quite unstructured person, so I need some structure to be productive. So so it had actually developed myself a lot as well, because I think I'm much more structured these days, but still I have the flexible mind. And I really love to work with creative people that have to give them trust, and also to get them to grow and develop. That's what I'm like. That's what's driving me.
That's really, yeah, that's a cool summary, actually. Bringing structure in the world where there is chaos and getting some results out of it, and collaboration. Yeah, that's a cool job. That's a cool job you have there.
Yeah, I really like it. I love it.
Yes, I understand. And the reason why we have this conversation is like many people are talking about being agile versus doing agile. And this is the question which, like, very often is it's kind of mystery. And that's why also people say, oh, we're doing Scrum, but sometimes doing Scrum doesn't mean that you're agile.
No, exactly. So doing agile or being agile to me is more to grasp the philosophy, maybe, and then you can use whatever framework, but before you really understand it on a deep level, then you are more doing agile, for example. But being agile, then you have tested things out, and then you have understood you can say the thinking behind it, and you come to another level where you are starting to change your values, and that's really what we are after, to think differently and to act differently, just because we share some values, which is maybe more about collaboration, for example, and trust, and so on. So I mean, you could, if you start to use Scrum, it doesn't really give you these values by automation. Of course, if you use it for a certain amount of time, you will slowly start to change. So, I mean, I'm one of the person that, in a way, believe in start doing things. It's one way to make changes happen. I mean, you can think about, oh, maybe we should rewrite our values into Agile values. That's one way of doing it. But I personally think that it's one way to actually establish the change and to be Agile is to start with a framework as such. But then you, of course, needs to be very sustainable, or what should I say, or I mean, you will have to work for a while until you understand what it actually is all about. It takes a while. So that's how it had been for me. So that's maybe why I think that's a good method. Well,
it makes sense. I mean, that's why, like, in karate, they do katas, right? To repeat it over and over again, so your body remembers it. And I think that's the concept of shuhari, which I've been talking in one of the early episodes a bit, right? Where you try to repeat things to understand it, to master, then you try to really use them and explore them, and then you actually deviate completely from them and forget them and use whatever you think is the right, but you know how to use it because you have mastered everything previously. So through learning through doing.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me, it's, well, I'm sometimes reading about philosophy, stuff like that. And then I was recently reading a book about judgment. So how do you get a judgment, for example? I mean, to get a good judgment, then you need to understand something very deep, and you need to, as you just said, you need to feel it in your body, and then you need to do it in practice, because otherwise it's impossible to get the kind of judgment. So in a way, to get into being something, then you need to get your body and your feelings into the game. That's for sure.
Now I'm thinking about those judges in the courts. Damn, they should know a lot, and they should experience a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
But the thing that you've mentioned, where you say start doing something in order to change the mindset, that's really essential. And I guess that's one of the approaches how you can transform the thinking of the organization and people within this organization. If we could go a bit deeper into that, like, maybe you have seen some examples of teams, organizations doing Agile, not being Agile yet, and being on the way. And especially it's interesting to know about the organizations that have been committed to the other ways of working. Like, we tend to call those things like waterfall ways of working, but it's maybe like large phases of design upfront, which I have recently learned as well. There's a term in Latin America. I think it's big design upfront or something like that.
Yeah, BODF for big design upfront.
Something like that.
BDUF, yeah.
BDUF, exactly.
Yeah.
BDUF, that's how they call it. And when these organizations, they have achieved some success, and they have seen this approach works, especially if the systems they work with are like large and complex, like ERP systems perhaps. And now they want to do something differently. They want to transform to Agile, but they still are strong believers of that old way of working. And then what do you do from there?
Are you talking about, I mean, I have honestly not been working with ERP systems in a long time. I did it in the 90s, I think once, but the problem which when it comes to ERP system is that
it's not like it's just something big and large that you execute in phases, in large phases where, like, planning takes a lot of time, execution takes even longer, and then like extensive testing and like
Okay.
UATs, and then you get this delivered to users, and that's where they say, "Oh, that's excellent," which happens rarely, and they say, "Wow, well, this is not super good and super nice," but still, in general, the organizations are getting something done, even though it takes a lot of when you start something and until you deliver something, it's a big gap where you get nothing.
Well, if you think about it, Agile have kind of originated from being in such situation, at least what I have heard, that these guys that invented Agile, they were stuck in some kind of large project for 2 years and they didn't deliver anything. And then they got very bored about the situation. So they said, give me these people, the experts people, 10 people or something, and give us a list of the most important stuff that you want to have delivered, and we will ensure we deliver it in 1 month. Just when they can focus on doing the actual work instead of, you can say, when you work in the old way, there is a lot of synchronization and administration that takes a lot of time, and a lot of checks that needs to be done by people that might not be that involved in the actual work and so on. So I mean, what I've seen when I've been working with teams, it's as I started to talk about it. If you take the situation where you have a team which work waterfall, that you coach them into agility, then yeah, it will normally take some time. They're kind of stuck into their roles, for example, in the beginning, and they are used to the handoffs, and they are dividing the work. And normally they don't think about deployment at all. That's something that happens kind of rarely. Testing is maybe a small portion of the work, even though it's very large in reality. So they normally produce bad quality. And then when you apply just such a method like Scrum on that kind of team, then they be aware of, okay, we should deliver something that's working in a short time period. We're not used to it. We're not used to deploy. We have to come up with a better method for that. And the big thing that I realized, okay, we need to test much better, because if we should produce something that works, then we need to do all the testing. And then they realize, okay, to be able to test them, we maybe need to change the architecture of the system, because we can't really test it in a good way. We have to test everything. For every time we make a small change, we change the code in 20 different modules. So we have to test the complete system for a bug, maybe. And then they start to understand. But it's of course a big process. And normally for me, it normally takes maybe 5 sprints or something at least to get people understanding the different minds and the different ways of working. And if it's very complex, then it can take even longer, I would say. So it's a completely change of mindset. I mean, because if you work in a waterfall style, then you are, I mean, it doesn't really matter what you're doing until you should deploy it 2 years later, and then you will discover all the problems.
Yeah.
But if I should say something interesting, so I had that experience, and then I thought it would be interesting to work with a startup company, because they will probably need my help a lot more, and so on. So I really wanted to work in the startup scene. And then when I came into one of the companies, that was a very successful company. And then when I came there and talked about an easy framework like Scrum, they were upset. We can't work this structure. Should we really be the structure? It's a lot of rules. We don't want that. So they were used to, you can say, I mean, that their CIO or CEO, he would come to say, we were going to go to this, we're going to go to Vegas on I don't find a word right now. Anyway, and now we need to show something like this thing. So you have 2 weeks to fix it. that's what's how they were working, and then they were doing everything they could to make it work.
Without any structure, just
yeah, exactly. So, but in that case, we started to use more structure, and the good thing was that when they were working with with other bigger companies, they have had a big trust problem because they couldn't really get trust. So they have had continuously checks on how they were doing because they have no plan. They couldn't show anything. And once they started to work with a light process like Scrum, then they could have a backlog and they had at least they know what's going to happen in 2-3 sprints on a high level, and suddenly they got a lot of trust. They didn't have to have a lot of checkup meetings and things like that because they can trust each other because they were visualizing what they were doing, and they had some kind of high level plan that was good enough for trust. So that was a very interesting experience as well, where it came from that perspective.
Oh, that's cool. I guess that's an example where the organization was agile without doing Scrum first, but then based on the needs, they have adopted to the reality, and they implemented Scrum as the way to gain more trust that they were lacking.
Yeah, they some kind of Scrumish method. Because they really need it, and also for them it was they have a code mess because every time they started some kind of new work with a customer, they just wrote more code without any version control or anything. So they came up with a very, very messy situation. So they really wanted to make products that they could sell and configure instead. So that was also part of that work that, by organizing things, if you work that unstructured, then it's very bad for the business for the future. It's a good strategy when you are small, to be very unstructured. But then as soon as you want to benefit from things, then it's much more wise to have an architecture, for example, which is modularized, that you can reuse parts of it and things like that. So in the beginning, if you're a startup, then I think it's just to produce results. And then once you have passed through some kind of gate, when you have become successful, then you need more structure. And if you're a large company that are in a phase where you need to become more, you have to do things faster, then
To be less structured.
then you have to accept that you are to some extent unsure and have uncertainty, and then you will have to let go of some structure. So you can't have it 100% predictable, because then you will have no creativity.
That is true. But it's also very much about the controls very often that I see.
Yes.
And structures are good, but the structures are made for something. And that something very often is control. And the reason for the control, I guess, in a lot of cases, is the lack of trust.
Yeah, it can also be if you do complex hardware products, for example, then you need to have structure to get things, to get things into your facilities, the logistics, and you have to do things in a certain order. So then it makes sense to have structure, of course. But if you are in a situation where you have a production which is very structured, and then you can be super successful and very productive. And typically, if you have that situation, then you will normally use that pattern for everything else. You will try to use that pattern in the finance part of the company, for example, and in the market maybe as well. And that might not be a good fit, especially when things are changing. And right now, when everything, when the competition and the opportunity to use new technologies is accelerating, then you need to have a way of working that works in that kind of environment. So you will have to have a way of working that works fine, even though it's a bit chaotic. And if you should be fast, then you need to trust the people in the organization to take most of the decisions. Otherwise, if you think about, you have to take 1,000 micro decisions a day. Let's say that you should ask some management board about all these decisions. It won't work.
No, yeah, it's as my friend at Spotify says, they have controlled chaos.
Yeah,
that's how they describe it, right? And they are very much empowered by taking daily decisions within their team, and actually quite big decisions as well. And it's not everywhere in Spotify, but in some parts it is like that. And at least from what people from that part of the company tell me, they are quite happy and doing quite good.
And of course, you need, as you say, in a way, you need to earn the trust. Of course, then we move into leadership. That of course you, as I said, you have to earn the trust. So
how do you gain the trust, or how do you earn it then?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, if you work as a coach and help a team to, change the mindset, basically what we talk about, to adopt an agile mindset, then in a way, all the ceremonies in, for example, Scrum, they are designed in a way to have the people engaged and involved, and by being involved and so on, they will gain trust after. As we carry on, just because they are allowed to take part, and they are. The leadership style is all about listening and asking questions rather than telling people how to do things. So in a while you start to build trust, but of course sometimes or often, we need to do some kind of team building exercises also to build trust. And it's basically it's not very complicated. It's all about getting to know each other on a deeper level, to know more about the individuals as persons, how they, about the family, what they are interested in on the spare time, and how they are thinking. And then you can maybe, when you are on that part, maybe you can start to think about, okay, what are your weak spots? What are your strengths? But as human beings, we need to get to that level which is needed. To build trust. Then you will have to start to scrap on the surface, to start with the easy things first, because we need to talk to each other a lot.
And that's very relevant for the team internal kind of collaboration, internal trust. And if we talk about the implementation of an agile in the organization on larger scale, then you have to gain the trust of the organization and all the stakeholders. And that's where, to my view, of course, transparency is the number one step in this direction. And whether it's a Scrum or Kanban, transparency will be there, and there are routines to enable that. It's one of the pillars, kind of. And the second thing, which no matter what kind of manager you are, whether from the traditional background or with the agile mindset, it's like you will still believe things when you get deliverables in place, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as the team will start delivering, that's kind of really good way to show that we can be trusted as a team, and we need more freedom to do things even better. And that's a great start of a dialogue and a great start of the journey, I guess.
Yeah, and I've been thinking quite much about this recently, just because we have been thinking of how do you become an awesome or productive team? What is it that really matters? And then to me, a lot of the things which is important to build a strong team, you will kind of get it automatic by working in iterations and by having, for example, retrospectives. Because I mean, one thing, if you work in iterations with your end user or customer taking part of the dialogue all the time, then you get the intrinsic motivation, because you get kind of a rewarded climate. Because if you do the good things, you will know it immediately, because you have the dialogue with the individual who actually are the, I mean, with the ones that have the demand. So you will know for sure if you do it good or if you don't do it that good as well.
And that means that you do have a goal. That means that you, as you say, you do have a demand. You know where to aim, and you will get satisfaction from getting there.
And the other thing is, okay, if you have a retrospective every other week or so, you will not only talk about the process, because the process in Agile is the individuals just as much, because it's the team, how they, I mean, the individual in the teams are part of the process, it's kind of integrated. So if you talk if you have a retrospective, you will normally talk both about the process and the team. So you will constantly work with the team as part of that. So in that way, you do these things that the HR processes are designed for to do, but you do it in a much faster pace. Because
what do you mean by that? Could you give a couple of examples of those HR processes?
Yeah, what I mean is, for example, in a normal HR process, then you will have this. I don't know what's the word. You have this survey, end user survey, or you can say employee survey that goes out.
Satisfaction, or
yeah, exactly, and that's normally once a year. So, and you're not really sure who wants to know these things, because you don't really know who is the receiver. So it doesn't give you that much value to answer these questions. So it's easy to be, I mean, to think about the negative stuff there. So it might be more negative than it actually is in reality. The other thing is this with salary revision talks that we have once a year as well normally. And it's supposed to give you some kind of boost in your motivation. That's really what we hope for. But normally, when you do it that seldom, it's hard to make a good judgment of your contribution, I guess, because it was some time since we talked about it. So is it really valid yet? And maybe the person who you're doing it with, your manager, might not be involved 100% in your work situation, so that's what also be hard. And normally, if you do a good job, then it's okay. So then then you get the standard. So you need to really do something high above what you should do just to get rewarded.
And over a course of a year, it's even no matter what you do, it's so easy to forget about it.
Yeah, so for most people, it's not that positive that it should that you hope for. So, but if you work agile, then you have a very close collaboration with the customer or end user, what we should call him, and they will also give you feedback all the time. So you know, okay, I'm doing a great job. You know that for sure, and that's really more important than anything else. So I think that's really strong thing with the teamwork and with working in iterations, that you get all these motivation that we really want to have, and we have tried to get it through the HR processes, but they are designed for waterfall organizations, you might say.
I totally agree with this. I also think that rather than having these like once a year things, probably most of the people would agree that they are not very effective. It's rather as you said, our goal here is to to motivate people, but we know that probably when it comes to software development, it's maybe different things that motivate people, like, intrinsic motivation, being able to do what you think is right, being able to execute tasks which are complex enough. I mean, what then Pink is talking about, where I don't think that has changed a lot.
No, I think that, I mean, for me at least, as an individual, and I think most people think like that, is that you really want to be in charge of your own destiny. You want to take your own decisions as much as possible. It's always, I mean, it's more interesting if you decide for yourself to do something, then you're really motivated. But if you are told to do something just for compliance reasons, then it's just some, oh no, that's a boring task you have to force yourself to do. And of course, there will always be things like that. You have to do your tax declaration, but it's not that fun.
Yes, that was my reason to join startups. Exactly, where you can define your destiny together with a team, and that feels awesome. You can have really fast feedback from the users you work with, or you are supposed to work with. It's great.
And the other thing also, which I forgot to mention, is the learning, I guess, because that's also one thing. I mean, right now we want to, in a way, all the big organizations, they want to come to a situation where people are motivated to learn themselves. And if you work in Timebox and do retrospectives, then you will force, or no, not force, that was a bad word, then you will motivate yourself to learn new things, because you will, as you reflect about how things are going and so on, and that you are also allowed to make changes, whatever changes you want in your process, then it will stimulate the learning, because you could actually, everything you learn, you can use it in the upcoming next few days. There's nothing that stops you. It's not a bureaucratic, complicated thing to get it in a live situation. It's just to do it, actually.
Continuing on the topic, I have my backlog that I think I would like to go through. And one of the items of my backlog is the question, which I think might be interesting for many people, knowing a bit about your work and the work you did with leadership and like management teams. What do you think are the main attributes of an agile leader, or the agile leadership as such?
I mean, the most important thing is to have this coaching leadership style, which is very different from, I mean, you are not supposed to tell anyone what they should do. It's more to listen to the people and ask questions rather than telling them how they should think and do. And I'm struggling a bit with it myself, I must say. So sometimes I have a tendency to give solutions, but that's not what you should do. You should be, even if you know what you should have done, it's not the best way to express it to someone else and try to convince them. It's much better to try to get that individual to come up to that conclusion by themselves. And that's it takes sometimes longer time and it's complicated, but what we want with the leadership is to develop people, and in order to develop someone, they need to understand and accept it in their minds. They're actually reframing their minds, and the only way to reframe a mind is that the person themselves are thinking, do the thinking.
Get there with your own mind, kind of.
And exactly.
Yeah. And then you will be motivated. by doing it. And that's where the manager should really kind of struggle with his wish to show the solution.
Yeah, so this is what when you are coaching the teams or an individual. But then the other important thing for a manager and the manager style is to be, see we call it systematic thinking. You have to see your organization as a complex adaptive system, because that's really what it is. It's not a machine. It's more like
a streamlined process, where you would like to put control gates and control everything.
No, exactly. So it's more like a brain. Actually, it's a complex network, like a brain almost. And you have to think about it like that. So how can you get this big brain as much freedom as possible to develop in the best way? How can you remove the blockers, and how can you embrace things for them so they can, so the brain can develop? That's basically, so you have to take away things that blocks this kind of thinking, a network organization. So in a way, some traditional organizations, they have, as we talked about before, they have a structure for some reason, but that structure will probably hinder more than support once you move into Agile. So you have to get rid of as much as possible just to get the freedom for people to act.
When it comes to the organization, which, as you said, does not does not manufacture hardware, right, where the processes are very streamlined, and there you would apply lean practices more than anything else. The way how Toyota developed the way of working, right? That's excellent. But when it comes to the creative parts of the organization, which is pretty much, I guess, everything else other than producing hardware, you can get this idea of a brain. I really like it, and then it's important to unblock it.
Yeah, so it's a good thing to think about brain, because we are really knowledge workers. That's the interesting thing, that if you think about the old way of doing work, then you were dividing all the small tasks into very small tasks, and you become a specialist on exactly that task. You have a timestamp for when you work. So work is only done when you are at the conveyor belt. So if you're not there, then you don't work. If you work with knowledge work, then when do you work? Is it at your desk if you are in the office? Is it when you are driving home, or is it when you are out running? You're constantly thinking about things. So it's a very different situation.
Damn, I was sleeping yesterday night, and I actually came up with two ideas for my upcoming workshop.
Yeah, that's typically how it is. I also, you are actually working all the time when you're reframing your brain during the sleep. Yeah, so that's why it's so different.
So then let me kind of rehearse a bit. So the first thing that you said, the attributes of the Agile leader, would be the coaching approach, where you as a leader would really coach people and let them get to where they should get, instead of pointing directly to the solution. The second thing would have this systematic thinking, where you as a leader think about the larger organization and try to find the ways to break these silos and try to find the bridges for your part of organization work more efficient within this larger network.
And I also forgot the most important, actually, I see, because if you coach someone, then of course they need to know the direction, and that's also a big thing, which is in the old days, in a traditional situation, then you wouldn't really think about the workers to think that much about the direction, because you should anyway tell them what to do. So why do they need where we're going? I can think about these things for myself. And then I just tell them, do this and do that and so on. They don't need to know the big picture, and they don't need to know the direction. But if you are trusting the team or individuals to think by themselves, then it's very important that they know why they should do a thing. So you have to be very good on communication, so you can describe the purpose for things, and then you will also make sure that the team and individuals, that they make their purpose very clear for themselves also.
So it's like pretty much setting up the problems that we would like to achieve as an organization, and then basically letting people find out how to do that.
Yeah, you can say so. You have to make it interesting, some kind of, if we call it problem or if we call it challenge, where are we going? What's the direction? It should be inspiring and challenging. And then, of course, to be there in that way, then you need to describe it with, you can say, motivating or positive language. It's not that fun to say, we should reduce the cost. It doesn't give you a lot of motivation. But if you have to say something like, we should we should roll the world, or we should
reduce the carbon footprint.
Yeah, make the best product or whatever. I mean, you have to make it. You have to make it a challenge rather than a problem, and it shouldn't be a negative wording. It should be like a positive wording that will guide you and think positive about it.
That's very important. That's true. But it's essentially setting up the purpose, the guiding star for these people. And so that's the third, maybe even the first attribute of a leader, right? Being able to out of all the directions within the organization, find the one where you kind of gravitate the most and set that for your, if we're talking about the first level management, like for your unit.
Yeah, so it's if you think about it, if you are a leader for a team, then you need to point out the direction for the team, and to be able to do that, then you need to know the big direction. So if you are a high level, or if we have levels, but if you are you can say, if we think about it as a network, but anyway, you will have some kind of hierarchy anyway, and then the person who is in charge of the vision needs to get everyone to, or of the purpose, I might say. That person must send the purpose to everyone, and they must be able to understand how they are interlinked to it. I mean, to get their purpose, to really get it working.
All right, that's really interesting. Anything else you could remember in terms of like agile leadership? What should be there? What are the critically important parts?
Well, and another thing when it comes to coaching, maybe it's also about feedback. So you should be able to establish the trust, as we talked about before, because that's really needed to be able to give each other feedback in the right way. So you must understand the individuals to talk to them. I mean the people in the team, they must learn in the teams how they should behave with each other in order to give each other feedback, so that everyone develops. So it should be, people talk about constructive feedback and things like that, but I'm a believer in a lot of positive feedback, and try to express also things that needs improvement in kind of a positive tone or a positive way, so it gets motivating rather than that you start to protect yourself. So to build this feedback culture, that's really important, and it's also challenging because
it's super challenging.
Yeah, because you never know. If you don't know people, then you don't know how they take things, if they take it personal or not. So you have to go
There are some studies that show that, you know, feedback is always perceived by our brain as a threat, as a risk. And yeah, you have to be in a very safe and trusted environment to be able to accept the feedback adequately. David Rock, I think, writes a lot about that.
Yeah, I think actually every time you get something negative to you, then you will be hurt by it. But if you have a positive attitude, maybe you can reframe it into some opportunity instead. But it's never a good thing, I think. I mean, for development, yeah. I mean, you can manage it if you are in a good mood and if you are if you are healthy and so on. But it's never a good thing.
No, it's a skill to provide the feedback in that way, that people could be motivated to change or adapt and accept it and be better versions of themselves in the future. It's really hard. I mean, both technically and also psychologically.
But also, what I'm thinking about more and more is if you're going to build a strong team, then I mean, one way also, I mean, you shouldn't really, even though you should be positive, but you will also need to bring up the conflicts, and you will have to talk about them, because as I realize, if you don't talk about it, then it will still be the elephant in the room syndrome. So it will be there, and it will actually slow down everything, and people will feel less trust and so. So if you have tough things, you need to take care of it, and then you will have to find some type of climate to have these talks, and having it, I mean, making people comfortable to to talk about difficult things. And if you do that, it will create your culture in the team somehow. If you, because you have to listen to each other and share things and come to some kind of conclusion.
Do you have any good techniques you could name for establishing this kind of exercise or this kind of climate in the team? Because I think techniques here help a lot.
Yeah, I mean, what I have used is talking sticks and things like that. So you're not allowed to. I mean, one person, everyone listen to one person that can say, they can give their idea about it, and then you pass the stick around, and you can do it in several rounds. And there is no debates in the beginning. You're kind of just listening to each other for a few rounds, so everyone can say what they, express the feelings basically without getting attacked. And then once you have done that for a while, then you can start to discuss it in an open discussion. But then you would have listened to each other for some time before that.
Mm-hmm. Can we have an example of that? Let's say elections in America.
Yeah, if we have elections in America, yeah, okay, then I will not express my opinion. I will listen to you. You have the stick. So what do you think?
So I have the stick, and then I will say, and of course, if we are in America, then I would say, oh, I am so much very happy about this election, and yada yada yada. And then I'll pass the stick to you.
Yeah, and I say something like, well, Trump is not that bad. He is a misunderstood guy. He had a really hard childhood, so we should have given him a chance. Then I pass it to you.
Okay. And we could use this technique to discuss the problems in the team.
Yeah, so what you might say something, okay, I understand your viewpoint about Trump, but I still think that we can't really have a clown like that in the parliament, and maybe then I change my mind on the next side when so it's more, I mean, if you have a conflict, then I mean you shouldn't when you, maybe I can't find the English word for this, but when
Swedish.
När du försöker såra andra genom att vara elak, det är ju en personkonflikt liksom. Personal attacks, that's what
Okay.
So, we shouldn't allow personal attacks, and that could happen if people get too upset. So the technique is to make it like a routine, a habit. How do we handle these things? So it's not really tough. I mean, even though it's tough, you have a way to handle it, and people can feel comfortable.
And again, they feel safe to discuss that. They won't feel threatened by it. It's a learning culture. It's a learning approach that we do here. And we're here standing for each other, and we're helping each other. With that mindset, it's easy.
Yeah, I was just thinking about some other thing, which also is interesting and complicated. That is, if you are a leader of a team or a manager, and there are big conflicts that can't be solved, then you also need to change the team. Basically, that it can come to that situation, of course.
You run away from the team war. I'm kidding.
No, I mean that you have to find maybe have to split the team for some reason, and then in that case, I mean, and find a better place for everyone if that's needed, and that's a really hard thing, which we don't talk that much about.
Yeah, because it's very sensitive and.
But it's actually worse to keep people together.
Yeah. The natural question that I have is like, what should this person, the agile leader, should have least of?
Well, I guess it's
of course the opposite things of
yeah, in a way the opposite things. I mean the command and control behavior. I mean it's very annoying, and I mean to have this status update meetings. It's also it takes time from. I mean, in some way, you want. I mean, if you have team members, they want to do their job, then everything that's doesn't feel valuable, that should be seen as waste and be removed, I think.
How would you recommend this to happen in practical life? I mean, there is a manager who really wants to get his hands on things, and he really wants the status updates, and he has built his organization around it. So like, you have these, like, maybe I don't know how to call them, like, these sessions where like everyone reports what happens on their projects, on their teams, on their initiatives. And many people consider that to be maybe a bit less effective and restrictive and sometimes humiliating. But some people enjoy it and some people like it. What's your take on that? Is that something that agile organizations should have or should have less, or how to deal with it if that's something that should be dealt with?
Yeah, well, I think I mean you will need to have some kind of check on things, of course, if it's going in the right direction, that's for sure. But it's very much how you do it, I guess. So if you have that kind of check and maybe call it sharing instead, and that you are.
So naming is important.
Yeah, naming is important, and also if the goal of the meeting is to maybe get help, for example, and
provide support.
Yeah, provide support rather than telling people to speed up. I mean, it must be like an offering to help rather than
questioning.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, as you said, it's really hard. I mean, to get people that are used to have control things to make them change into an agile leader takes also trust, because what I've seen is that they must how to say get I mean they must get understand that they can trust the team, and then you will have to visualize the result, and you will have to start to show deliverables that they actually deliver on time, something that's valuable, and that you have kind of a plan that they can look into, and they can change their minds in the plan if they want, and so on. So they start to think about other things rather than controlling. Maybe they find it more interesting to collaborate and to do the best thing for the company by you can say by changing their minds and prioritize the things that's most valuable for the moment.
It's very interesting, because the things you're talking about and the way how you describe it, like, you know, we're doing our actions, we're offering the best we can in order to get the others, like, maybe being more interested in doing more right things. And I'm thinking about this from the perspective of, let's say, an agile consultant starting or entering the organization. And very often those people have, like, you know, well, we have a plan. Within a year, we would like to be agile. And then you get that, you know, you already get the time frame. Then it's quite interesting. What can you do in that sense?
I mean, the interesting thing is that it's, I mean, as you said, what you can do, you can have some kind of plan, of course, because I've been working in some transformations, and the largest one was maybe, I don't remember 100% now, maybe it was like 80 teams in Sweden, and then it was 150 teams across the world in different design centers. And then, of course, we started off to do education. They have, when I came in there, they have already made the change on the organization. So it was changed from having component owners and a specialist into cross-functional teams and product owners instead. That they were more owning the features rather than the components as such. And then we were working with training. That's really what you can plan. You can always plan. You can plan the initial training. So everyone should go through Scrum, Kanban, and some team building exercise. So we were doing those for every team. So it took a lot of time, but that's what to get everyone on the same baseline. But once you have done that, then you need to have a more flexible plan, because I mean, once people start to change, then it's not linear any longer. Then you will have to come up with some other way. Maybe you should, I mean, you should coach the most important initiatives maybe in the company, or maybe you should coach the ones that have most problems. I mean, you have to take some kind of decision where you will aim your force, so to speak.
Yeah, understood. And I think we are, like, kind of getting to this. The changes in the organization is very often the result of someone driving the change, right? And this is like, well, leadership or agile leadership. And what you've been working with is you've been actually trying to transform traditional managers into agile leaders. What would be your reflection on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are individuals, of course. So, I mean, so some people understand that they need to change, and some people won't change because they are. It doesn't matter how much you try; they will not change because they don't believe in the agile ways of working. So that's really what you can see. And what I've seen is that some people have come in for a while, or maybe have been part of the management team, and and if they don't have the transformative mindset, then they have quit or find some other place, I guess, because it won't work if unless they have the motivation. But of course, it's not an easy thing to change, just because of, I mean, the managers themselves, they have a lot of management processes that they should fulfill. So you can say that being a leader, that's one part of their job. They have a lot of other jobs as well that they should do. They should do budget, they should do a lot of HR stuff, and they should do compliance things. And what I've seen,
should that be automated in 10 years completely, that part?
Yeah, exactly. We have to come up with I mean, if they want them to have a good or fair chance to change themselves, then they need to get rid of the structures or the processes that force them to behave in another way. So they don't have sometimes not the chance to make the change, because they are kind of hold back. So even though they want to maybe to go in the direction, then the system in the organization might point in a different direction, and they will follow the money, I guess. So if they are expected to do something for that purpose, then they won't change. So for me, as becoming more and more experienced, I'm starting to think more about those things, and to kind of work with the structures and try to change them, and I mean, by collaborating with the ones that are responsible for the structures, and make them to understand that it goes against what we really want.
So essentially creating the environment for the leaders to have, again, the environment to be ones.
Yeah, they are also part of the if we talk about the brain, you know, if they are what should I say, if they are kind of if they have to spend time with a lot of other things which might seem to be important for some reason. I mean, it's always like, I mean, of course you need to have a budget, but how can you do budget in a way that support the agile mindset rather than go in another direction? It's important to have a lot of things like we talked about, salary revision talks and things like that. But how can you do it in a way that's actually feels like a motivation and a driver rather than holding back? So of course you have to work with everyone in the organization. That's how it is.
Essentially creating this ecosystem on your level.
Yeah.
And I guess being an agile coach is something that kind of prescribes that you do have, you can, you know, knock into the doors which are normal would be closed for the others, and that's what I enjoy a lot, being myself one of those. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't have the mandate maybe to do things, but because you have a title, you can do things, and you can talk to people, and you can change the way, or at least suggest the way for them to change things. And I think the limit here is that there are also levels where you can reach. Mm-hmm. And in the organization, it's good to have several levels of those like coaches collaborating together, so they could cover the whole organizational structure. If it's too high enough, then, you know, every level.
Yeah, and as we said, I mean, one of the, if you want to make changes, then to get some kind of speed, then you will have to come up with a way. I mean, similar to the time box that the team have. I mean, if we have yearly cycles, then you can only make a change once a year, and that's not that. I mean, then it will take forever. So we'll have to come up with some kind of cadence for how you do it more frequent.
Yeah, and that means having more focus, having more time prioritized for that.
Yeah. So and then we come into like strategy. Okay, if you want to make changes in a faster pace, then you will have to work with a strategy in a faster pace, basically, because it's a strategy that should be the transformative things you do in the company to take you in a certain direction. So we can't have a process where we work with strategy on a yearly cadence any longer, because then we can only change once a year. Okay, we need to come down to quarters at least, and then we need to have less things that we do to have the focus that we actually do the most important things. And if you think about the big brain again, I think that everyone needs to understand, or you can say it like this: the more people understand the complete strategy, then you can, for example, you can combine things so you get more value out of the strategy work. So I mean, if it's not that transparent, then 10 teams might work on the same thing, for example, or maybe some part of the organization working on something enabling, but it would be a better thing to work with that enabling thing in a real case rather than doing only the enabling part. Do you see what I'm coming from? For example, if we want to move faster, then we need to we need to find a reason for doing the change. That must be a business driver. So it's more efficient than to say, for example, okay, you should be team-based. Okay, why? Just because it's a good idea if you want to become agile. If we instead say, we should be able to, we need to be able to sell things from online in half a year, for example, or something like that, or we should increase the sale margins or whatever it is, then it could drive the change that you actually need to make the change of the organization. Otherwise, you can't reach that level.
I see what you have just mentioned. I see this from two perspectives. One perspective is that you might say as an organization, okay, we have this challenging goal. Let's make a project around that. Let's be able to sell something within half a year. And then you build a project team around that. You do 2 months planning, 2 month execution, 1 month market pilot, and then maybe a production launch. Or from another hand, you could say, well, we need to be able to sell things in half a year, right? Let's make a team that will focus on this. And this team, we will give them enough autonomy to do that. They know exactly what needs to be done. They know the challenge. They know why we need to do this. And we will give them the best support we can. And we will make sure that this team can run as fast as they can to do that.
Yeah, in a way, that's what I meant. I mean that if we can use the business challenges as a driver for make the organizational changes, that's even better than that we have to fight to do the change.
Just for the change.
And then having some kind of argumentation about it. And it's hard to understand why we should do it. But if we say, this is why we should do it because of this, then it makes sense.
But this is the thing, because in both of those approaches I mentioned, for the organization, they assume they will achieve goal in half a year in both cases. And then if the organization runs in a more traditional way, then they would say, why do we have to change our way of working? Because we will get there anyways. And then it's like, then you still have to get into the argument saying, well, this team will be more independent. They will come closer to the customers much faster, maybe within first 4 weeks and yada, yada.
What I was after was that I think it's impossible to do it that fast with a traditional way of working.
Oh, no, yes, I understand that. I understand. And I totally agree with the motivation. It's much better if the motivation comes with the business with financial background. It's much easier to accept rather than saying we change because we want to be agile. Does that add any value to us as an organization? Well, we will move faster. Yeah, where exactly? And then you will come closer to the where you could also benefit from that financially.
Yeah, because we're in the long run. So why do we need to change? Of course, it's for you can say profit purposes. At the end, of course, we need to have an organization that could that are competitive, of course. But then at the same time, in order to be competitive, we need to have employees that likes the culture and like to work for the company. So it's kind of a win-win situation. But I think it's the need for change is to be able to to stay productive and to stay innovative. That's really the main driver behind everything, I think.
I have a friend or a buddy that is a serial startup or entrepreneur, you could call it, and he once we used to have a lot of discussions about the money and the goals and users, and he said once, like, do the great stuff and then do that stuff in the best possible way you can, and then the money will follow up.
Yeah.
And I really believe in it, and I support that if you do your best and if you do something great, and you do your best to achieve that, so you enjoy it as well, and then the money will pretty much follow up. I think that's also corresponds to Japanese philosophy, where they say how you can earn money from your hobby.
Yeah, but I agree 100% with what you said. Okay, we can talk a little bit about coaching management teams, maybe.
Yes.
I'm an agile coach from the start, and then when I was asked to coach the management teams, even though I was reading things and think maybe how should I coach them, and then I come to the conclusion of maybe they need some kind of visualization of the work that they're doing, and also maybe they need to think about these team building things to trust each other and things like that. But I was not really. I was in the beginning. The mistake I did was to think of them as an agile team in the beginning, that they had the same need for the sprint length, for example, and the task boards. So if you think about a management team, they need to visualize what they are working with, but they don't have the same time frame, for example, and they don't have. In the beginning we were on too low level. It's no idea to talk about tasks for them. So what we ended up with was the strategy work. That's really it's the most important work, and that they can communicate the strategy, what we have been talking a bit about. And then of course also it's also about, okay, what kind of team is this? Because a team which should be very, very high performing, then they need to work with each other 100%. But most management teams, they work with other people most of the time, and then they spend some time together. It's normally a few weeks or a few hours a week, and then they have a kind of monthly meeting and some strategy meetings. So they are not the same kind of team as an agile team. So then you need to think of them more like individuals. So they need to be. You can't coach them as a team. Of course, they need to have trust, but you will always have to think about that they also have other things on their agenda. So that's my learning. So you can't expect them to become that high productive, especially not if they are a big team. That could also happen sometimes, that there are a lot of people, and then it's also make things complicated because. Yeah, so then it's more that you have to coach them also as individuals in another, I guess, because of course some things that they have in common as part of their work, that could be, then they can be seen as a team. But most of the times it's more valuable to coach them as individual, and that they contribute with their part rather than trying to establish some kind of team which is not because it's not really what it is. It's more like a work group, or it's more like a group.
Yeah. But then how would you define topics for coaching? Would you allow that to be something that, you know, your person you're coaching would come up with, or would it be something from the strategic initiative you're working together as a team? Or like, what would be those individual sessions kind of devoted to or dedicated to?
Well, it depends on the level, I guess. I mean, if it's a smaller team, then it can be really individual things that you can. It can be anything. Then you become more like an individual coach rather than an agile coach, I guess. But otherwise, I think that if I coach on a higher level, then somehow you will have to, as we talked about, facilitate different workshops that which might be more specific. They have a purpose, and it could be more on strategic level. It could be on changes that's needed, for example. Then you become more like I mean, if we, for example, want to change the leadership, if that's one thing, or improve, we might say, then you can design a creative workshop so that somehow give some empathy about the situation that we need to change. Then you have to get the decision makers somehow to feel the pain of the problem to be able to change their minds, I guess. So that kind of coaching is more to, you can say, transformative coaching of the management team to make them understand the problem. Yeah.
Well, that's super interesting. To me, the problem is that the time that the management teams would prioritize for this. You know,
they have a lot on their agenda, so that's what I mean, and that's it's normally, you can say, it depends where you are, but it could be some processes that have been decided in a company. So even though they might want to change it, maybe you have to find another partner to talk to, because they are the ones who owns those processes, for example. So that's why, as we talked about, we have certain budget process, for example, and we have like things that you have to comply with, for example, for some reasons, if you are on the stock market and so on, that actually adds up on your table as a manager. So we have to always think about those things. How can we, as you said, can we automate things? Can we reduce that part of it, or how should we do it? And that goes hand in hand. I mean, for the manager side, if they were more focused on the strategy work, and that they and trusted the teams to do more of the operative things, and there was some kind of network where they met when it was needed, then and there was not too many meetings that took away time and energy from these things.
There's an excellent concept which is called, I think, spaces or something like that. I think it was also was it some sort of a Swedish professor invented that? Well, the concept is super simple. If the organization should have a space where things are happening, and if you would like to be part of that happening, then you should come to that place and be there. Like if you have a team that is working with your accounting system, you want some change, well, come to the place where the team is located. Be there with them in the morning, tell them what you need, it'll be done. If and that minimizes all the hassle of booking things in calendar, removes a lot of hassles of these overheads. And on the other hand, it's super transparent. Whoever wants the information, he can just be there and learn it. I guess for this certain level management, this would go really, really well. But I guess it's only when you need some sort of strategical information from all the units, then you have some sort of reporting. But that, I don't know how often would that happen. Maybe not much.
But when it comes down to here, when we talk about it, if that's your proposal here, I mean, to make that happen, then we must have a kind of an acceptance of the learning in the organization. Because if you want to be too productive, then you will always choose to do the productive thing. I mean, in your team rather than to help out with other things. So that's also a trick. How should we think about that? I mean, maybe to accept a little bit lower productivity for more learning. I guess that's what we want.
That's a common sense, I think. I mean, it's the same as you have agreements, like, you know, in your sprints, we have an agreement. If we start the work on a task within the sprint, we won't let it go before we finish it. But, you know, sometimes there are situations when, you know, someone comes back and says, well, this actually doesn't make any more sense. And then we have to let it go. It's a bit more painful. And if you're on sprint, it's much less painful if you do Kanban. It's the same thing, what you're talking about. If the team wants to be super efficient, but someone stands and asks and needs for their help, it's a common sense. We're all good people. We will, of course, attend that person to that person's needs. It could be a good idea to maybe think about some other topics, because I think you're extremely interesting person to talk to with a lot of experience.
Thank you.
And I will not say that I will cut this out. No, it's for you. I really enjoy talking to you, man.
Yes, thank you very much, and I really enjoy to talk to you as well. So it's very open-minded and interesting to go. I mean, I as you know, I'm a bit unstructured, so I need someone to get me in the direction.
I don't know if today's conversation was very structured, but we've covered some topics, and I like. I mean, I believe that, you know, some amount of unstructurity adds to creativity. So I support that. And today I think we had quite good
flow.
Flow. Yeah, exactly. That's the word.
Yeah, thank you very much. I look forward to the new invitation then.
Yes. And then thank you for today, Håkan, and really, really wish you a good weekend.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure talking to you.
I wish you the same. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.